he was an incredibly charismatic guy, very very self-confident, very funny, exceptionally, really, really witty, very cutting. Not a kind sense of humor by any stretch, and not a kind person often in his corporate life. He really belittled. He had very low tolerance for idiots, and at any point anybody can be an idiot. So it could be pretty nasty, but very loved television, loved the feeling of television, loved the process of it, loved looking at funny people and thinking they could be TV stars, loved thinking about how the audience would respond, loved coming up with goofy TV-ish ideas and angles on them. He was really a brilliant. He wasn't brilliant creatively in a traditional sense. He was a brilliant marketer. He would really think about how to package something and sell it. Began when he was at WGN, I think, which is where he started in Chicago. And he came up with Gorilla, Gorilla My Dreams. These kind of ways of packaging afternoon movies and finding great ways to sell them. So he was a true TV kid. He came out of the medium; it was his language, and he spoke it fluently. But he was intimidating. He could be really cold. Sometimes he had these very hooded eyes, and just kind of, and he sort of narrow them if he didn't like what was going on, and it could be pretty scary. People, particularly Warren Littlefield and the VPs, lived in a mortal terror of him and of his disapproval, so it was a very NBC was a terrible environment, and the environment as a result, the environment he created at NBC that was created around him because of he wasn't a strong administrator, and he wasn't because really what he loved was the creative side of television. He didn't really love running
a business,
an organization. There's no part of Brandon that responded to that in the least. There was nothing about him that, if you knew him well, there was nothing about him that was a businessman. He didn't like business people, ultimately. He didn't care about him. He'd much rather hang out with a bunch of writers and at a desk coming up with jokes. Brandon was in his core a writer, or a wannabe writer, and that's, or wannabe sitcom producer. And he wasn't that, and because he didn't really know how to lead a business, and because he wasn't a strong leader, in my opinion, in retrospect, in that way, he was great at being Brandon, but it left NBC as a highly politicized. Unlike Grant Tinker, who came before him who left just as I was coming in, Grant may not have been a creative genius. I don't really know. I never really knew him, but he was a wonderful sort of figure and brought people together and really moved the organization forward. And Brandon had none of that, and as a result, he had an organization that was highly dysfunctional, highly politicized, and really worked against him in many, many ways. Because the people, when there's a power vacuum in those kinds of ways, the Stalin-like figures tend to occupy the space, and that's what happened to him. People who were very political, but who had their own agendas, really got much more active. So NBC couldn't have been more dysfunctional and horrible as a place to work. So I was there for a year and a half, and I have to say that I probably hated that job more than any job I've ever had, including the night watchman job, or the night desk clerk job, which I really didn't like.
Wow, that's saying something.
But it was just a dreadful place.